Hello and good morning. My name is Francine Harrigan. I'm with the United Nations Department of Global Communications. We're very pleased to have you join us today on the second day of the United Nations 2023 Water Conference here at UN headquarters in New York. For today's press briefing, I'm happy to introduce colleagues from the UN University Institute of Water, Environment and Health, who are here to share their findings from the Global Water Security 2023 assessment. Let me first introduce to my left Dr. Charlotte MacAlister, Senior Researcher at the UN University Institute, and in the middle, Professor Kaveh Madani, Director of the United Nations University Institute. Kaveh, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Welcome to this press conference. Thank you, the United Nations, for giving us this opportunity. I'm also thankful to the government of the Netherlands and Tajikistan for their leadership, getting us together again after 46 years to talk about water and take water seriously. I think this is also going to go into be the message of our report, which has some alarming statistics and results, but it is better to disclose that early on while we still have time if we want to deliver on the SDGs by the 2030s, and also the water action decade. We are in the midst of both of these. It's a good coincidence. 7 years away from 2030s and 5 years away from 2028. So it is a time for us to look at the status of water security around the world and see what our performance is and how we are doing. As the academic arm of the United Nations University is pleased to share these results. We have the mission of bringing the state-of-the-art science to the room, to the policy circles, including intergovernmental circles and the UN, and share those results that might not be readily available. And among those are the statistics on water security around the world. The power and capacity of governments to provide sustainable quantities of water at a good quality, so people that supports the livelihoods of people, human well-being, and improves their socioeconomic status. We know what is happening around the world. I think you know it enough. This is the second day of the conference. We know the state of water is not good around the world. We know about climate change and its impacts on water. We know about the extreme events and what they can do to us. We know about water-induced migration conflicts, and we know about the disproportional impacts of water scarcity and water insecurity on people around the world, on the poor, on women, on children. And with all of that knowledge, still we are not doing enough on water. Our message is clear. If we don't do enough for water, for the SDG 6, we will undermine the progress on the other SDGs. Whatever we want to do and deliver would have relationship and interdependence on water. So unless we have a serious action, unless we make a meaningful progress on SDG 6, we cannot deliver and fulfill the goals that we have by 2030. And this is an important message. Another important message for the, we scientists like to do more studies, but we need data. One thing that we need to do is measurement. We have to know what is going on. We have to monitor properly and see if we are delivering or not. This assessment, this large exercise that was done by a wonderful team of researchers shows us that we don't have enough data when it comes to water security assessment, and this creates a new responsibility for the custodian agencies that are in charge of water data collection. Also creates a responsibility for governments to properly report on the different indicators related to the water security so we can understand what is happening around the world. The other issue is the issue of scale, and it's not easy to monitor things around the globe. We are doing it at the national scale with the understanding that at the regional and household scales, things can be different. But this is an opportunity for us to understand, to see what is missing, what the gaps are, and what we can do. So we're still positive and hopeful that if timely action is taken, we can change the course and do things differently. So with that, I think I'll pass it to Charlotte to continue.
Okay. Thanks, Kaveh. So this assessment, as Kaveh mentioned, it quantifies and compares water security globally. We used 10 components of water security and applied them in 186 countries, which is home to more than 98% of the world's population, so 7.8 billion. So with this assessment, we also support the improved data and information pillar of the Water Acceleration Framework. And we highlight overall status of water data availability, identifying gaps, and recommending improvements for the remainder of the SDG era. So going straight into the technical side of this, which is my responsibility, as I mentioned, we assessed 10 components of water security, but what is a little bit different to other assessments is that the components that we used are based entirely on development outcomes that are explicit within the SDG framework. So primarily that means SDG 6, which we all know is the water goal, but also SDGs 1, 3, 11, and 13. So that's poverty, health, climate, and communities. Specifically, the 10 components which you can see in the table are drinking water, sanitation, good health, water quality, availability, value, governance, human and economic safety, and water resource stability. So the first of those 9 components, as is illustrated in the table, are actually SDG indicators. Using SDG indicators really, I mean, in theory, it should make it possible to quantify national water security for all countries that are, all member countries, that is, that have subscribed to the SDGs and to the Water Action Decade commitments. You know, that should give us an explicit picture of water security halfway through the SDG era and the Water Action Decade. And I'll say that's the theory, but in practice, it's not always that easy. So the 10th component, which I mentioned here, water resource stability, that is not an SDG. And that component assesses freshwater availability from year to year, so how freshwater is changing, but also countries' ability to mitigate change through storage. This is not an SDG, but it probably should be an SDG. So to make the assessment truly global, we applied an inclusive approach to include a maximum number of countries, and they are represented regardless of the size, the population, or the geography. And this is important because there are regional assessments. Let's not forget, you know, for example, there's the ADB, Asian Water Outlook, and we previously last year released an assessment of African water security, but they are regional assessments. So trying to assess water security across all countries at a global scale is quite another exercise. It's a lot more difficult, you know, not least because of, as I mentioned, population size, country size, physical factors. So in this assessment, we initially tried to assess a long list of over 230 countries, but we had to reduce that finally to 186 countries that had enough data to make a realistic assessment. But this still accounted for 99.8% of the global population. This map actually shows the final results of the assessment. So ideally using SDG data where it was available, but in some cases we had to use proxy data from global data sets. We scored every country basically out of 10 for each of the 10 components. So they had a final country score out of 100. And then from this, we classified from the final scores, so the scores out of 100, we classified countries as water secure if they scored over 75, moderately secure if they scored between 65 and 74, insecure if they scored between 41 and 64, and then critically insecure if they scored 40 or less. So if the 10 components marked out of 10 summed up were less than 40, the countries are basically critically insecure, and there's absolutely no doubt about that. We analysed the final scores in terms of, between countries, within regions, and between income groups. And this chart shows the distribution of national water security scores by region. In fact, no better with my glasses on. Aging's a terrible thing. Just everything's blurry. So what you can see actually in this plot is we used 4 very large regions in order to make this realistic. What you can see in the blue vertical line is Africa. So clearly, none of the 54 African countries assessed are even moderately secure. They're all either insecure or critically insecure. The Asia Pacific has a full range from water secure, moderately secure, insecure, and critically insecure. The Americas are doing much better. They still do have a large number of insecure countries, but they also have some moderately secure and secure countries. Europe does actually have some insecure countries, but it has the majority of the water secure countries. And then we also took SIDS aside, so small island developing states, because they're a special category, especially with respect to water. We of course assessed them using the same criteria, but here you can see them displayed the full range for all SIDS. That had sufficient data to assess, and you can see that no SIDS are of course, water secure. Bahrain is moderately secure, but the majority of SIDS are either insecure or critically insecure. So, in fact, while all regions do have a range in water security, least developed countries, so LDCs and SIDS in particular, face critical levels of water security, obviously due to the range of compounding factors. So in total, across all regions, 23 countries are critically water insecure according to our classification. These include 16 LDCs and 7 SIDS. So I'm just going to give you a quick rundown of the critically water insecure countries. And at the very bottom of the list is the tiny Solomon Islands, followed by Eritrea, Sudan, Ethiopia, Vanuatu, Afghanistan, Djibouti, Haiti, Papua New Guinea, Somalia, Liberia, Kitts and Nevis, Libya, Madagascar, Pakistan, South Sudan, Micronesia, Niger, Sierra Leone, Yemen, Chad, Comoros, and Sri Lanka. So the 33 countries that were water secure, not surprisingly, are primarily in Europe. So Sweden was the most water secure country and the highest score. I have to say no country, of course, scored 100. Sweden scored the highest, followed by Denmark, Luxembourg, Austria, Norway, Switzerland, Finland, and Iceland. Also Ireland, France, Lithuania, Greece, Germany, the UK, Estonia, Italy, Latvia, Spain, Slovakia, Slovenia, Croatia, Czechia, Hungary, and Portugal all scored as water secure. Water secure countries in the Asia Pacific include New Zealand, Cyprus, Australia, Japan, Israel, Kuwait, and Malaysia. Canada and the US are the only countries in the Americas that make it into the water secure group. So what is it that makes them secure or water insecure? I'm going to give you a quick rundown through the 10 components. So, in fact, I can also say, just as an aside, the 23 critically insecure countries all score very low on the first 7 components, and these are the main components of the insecurity, let's say. So moving first to drinking water, 70% of the global population, that is 70%, still have no access to safely managed drinking water. That's critical. That's SDG 6.1, safely managed drinking water. 10% of the global population still have no access to basic drinking water. So that's not safely managed, that's basic drinking water. And as you can see from the map, that's primarily in Africa and to a certain extent in Asia, and you can see there PNG in the Pacific. So, you know, that's not looking great halfway into the SDGs. In fact, Africa has the lowest levels of safe wash worldwide, contributing largely to its low water security. 31% of African population in 54 countries, that includes 33 LDCs and 6 SIDS, still don't have access to basic drinking water. Moving to sanitation, over half of the world's population still don't have access to safely managed sanitation. That's not no sanitation, but that's safely managed sanitation, which is 6.2. And 22% still have no access to basic sanitation. And again, you can see the red area, the lowest scoring, obviously, it's in Africa, and there are some countries in Central and South Asia. So in Africa, in fact, 15%, take a step back, over 1 billion people globally still don't have access to safely managed sanitation. And the consequence of this is very clear in the third component, which is health, and the metric that we use for health was wash-attributed mortality. So this is the WHO 3.9, SDG 3, WHO monitored SDG 3.9. So this is the number of people that die due to lack of wash services. And you can see that, of course, again, the combination of low safely managed drinking water and sanitation in Africa contributes to very high mortality due to lack of wash services. I think alarmingly, what was alarming to me is that this situation isn't actually improving. Globally, compared to 2016 WHO statistics, which was the last time that this SDG was reported on, in 2016, when we compare 2019 mortality rates to 2016 mortality rates, 164 countries are actually worse off than they were in 2016. More alarmingly, I think, when you compare the number of people that die due to wash, which we were just looking at here, to the number of people that are dying globally due to water-related disasters, I mean, you can see, okay, look at the red areas in the map. When we skip to human safety, which is the number of people dying as a result of water disasters, so that could be too much water or not enough water. Far more people die from lack of access to wash than die from climate, let's say climate disasters, which make the news every day. I'm not saying that people aren't dying. They are, but far more people are dying from lack of safe water, safely managed water, and safely managed sanitation. And what you can't see from the map is, so both of these mortality rates were assessed on the same scale. To give you an idea of what the mortality scale is, so 40 countries globally had rates of more than 30 per 100,000 people dying annually from wash, and only 4 countries had the same rate of mortality from water-related disasters. You can see actually what's interesting in this map is that globally everyone is affected by water-related disasters. There's no regional pattern here, and in fact, according to the data, at least the UK and France scored really badly in the last couple of years due to heat waves. So no one is immune from water-related disasters. So coming back to water quality, so we had low rates of drinking water safety, low rates of sanitation. Not surprisingly, water quality is also looking pretty poor, and you can see again the regional trend. In fact, it wasn't possible to assess this component using the SDG criteria because only 15 countries have reported industrial water treatment so far. 15 countries. However, household wastewater treatment has been assessed by WHO using the sanitation data, so that's the data that we use. We're only referring to treatment of household waste. And again, you know, the regional trends are pretty clear. But I mean, come on, 15 countries, halfway through the SDGs. The next component 5, availability. So this is basically the amount of water that's used compared to the amount of water that's available. Interestingly, the amount of water available that countries have available doesn't necessarily translate into overall water security. So you can see large parts of Africa, the amount of water that's being used is a lot less than the amount of water that's available. However, they still remain critically water insecure. The next component, water value, also an SDG. This is basically the dollar value per meter cubed of water used. Again, Africa and South and Central Asia have very low water values. What's also interesting about this is you can see some high-scoring countries in Africa, and this is because many national economies that are dominated by petroleum industries and mining activities do attribute very high economic values to the water that they use. So that could be like over $100 per cubic meter. But this doesn't translate into investment in sectors such as WASH or human safety. So while they have a high value attributed to water, that doesn't translate into better water security. Next is governance. So interestingly, governance remains weakest in the countries that need it the most. So again, you can see in the Northern Hemisphere, governance is scored very highly. In the South, where it's most needed, not doing too well. So economic safety, also an SDG. In fact, this is basically the impact of essentially floods and droughts. This couldn't be assessed using the SDG data. It's too weak or just generally inconsistent or non-existent. So this is based on globally modeled data sets. So again, just like human safety, no region is immune from the impacts of floods and droughts. And this is, of course, only likely to get worse in the future. So finally, I'm missing a page. Sorry. I'm old school, I still need paper. Countries at risks of flood and drought have compounded challenges, that makes it hard for them to meet many of the other development indicators. Sorry, I skipped this one. So water resource stability, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is not an SDG, and it probably should be an SDG. So again, we can see that countries with high interannual variability, so that means year to year the amount of water available to the country is changing. It could be a drought one year, a flood another year. The way to mitigate this risk is with storage. Unfortunately, the only global data sets available are large dam storage through the ICOL data. The International Commission on Large Dams is not the best data set to use, and it's not relevant in small countries, especially in SIDS. You're not going to have a huge reservoir in a small island. But this component does assess the capacity of countries to mitigate the risks with storage. And again, countries in the South are scoring very low in this component. Finally, to wrap it up, we assessed we grouped countries by the World Bank income group. So low-income countries, lower middle income, upper middle income, and higher income countries, and compared the water security status. So what is obvious here is that even high-income countries have there are even many high-income countries are critically insecure or insecure, but the low-income countries and the lower middle-income countries, none of them are even moderately secure. So, even though rich countries can be insecure, of course, they have the resources to invest in all of the mitigating mechanisms and infrastructure to improve their water security. So clearly there is a large economic driver behind water security, but it's not the only driver. 29 low-income countries score between 29 and 59, and the 50 high-income countries have scores ranging from 36 to 90, where Sweden was the highest, as I mentioned. So finally, the assessment was only as good as the data that's available, and we spent, I don't know how many hours trawling the global data sets to find the best data. I essentially dream in Excel spreadsheets, so I can, guarantee that that is the case, and that we used everything that was available. National water security doesn't necessarily, in the way that we have assessed it with national scores, it doesn't necessarily represent what people on the ground and communities experience. These are national statistics, right? And it doesn't reflect inequalities between rural and urban populations, which are obviously huge, or between rich and poor. This is income group based on GNI per capita, but that's just a macro indicator. If we really want to reflect the situation that people feel on the ground and help the most vulnerable and marginalized, we have to think about how they experience water insecurity, whether that's physical and mental health, or that their inability to have a stable household income and for water to be affordable to them. That is not, affordability is not assessed, not well assessed within the SDG 6, and it was not assessed at all within our assessment. And in the future, if we really do want to meet our development goals, that needs to be addressed seriously. And that's all I've got.
Thank you.
That was quite a lot, though, yeah? Thank you so much, Charlotte. Kaveh, let me open the floor. I'll take the first question here and then move to the left. Thank you. If you can state who you're with. Thank you.
This is Mariam Ramadi with Iran International. Thank you so much, both of you, for doing this briefing today. I have one very short question. Given the reason that I'm asking this question, because you said we all know how this is affecting the world, and if we don't take any actions, the rest of the goals, we are not going to just achieve them. This water conference is very important. The whole world came together to talk about how the situation is dire. But there is not going to be any product after 3 days, no resolution, no agreement on how to address the problem. Are you at all worried that the world is not taking the matter as serious as you scientists are taking it? And also, do you think this water conference is going to have any results after reading this report that you published? Thank you.
So let's not be too pessimistic, and we cannot predict what comes out of this conference, but it's a big step forward. After 46 years, we're back in the conference talking about water. We are seeing progress when it comes to the climate change COP. We are seeing that water is coming back up in the agenda. So the countries are talking about it. This was not something that was included in the Paris Agreement, but now people are talking about it. FAO is making it a priority. Water is a priority. When it comes to biodiversity, it is a priority. So indeed, I think for the first time as a scientist, I get very hopeful that, to see these signs of progress in different intergovernmental agencies, in different forums, people understanding the value of water. Let's not forget that we still don't have, UN doesn't have a water designated agency, despite the importance of water, and that is part of the problem. But there would be some, I would say, I would expect some good recommendations coming out at this conference related to how deal with, approach the water problems later on. Another thing is, as scientists, we are supposed to say the things that many policymakers are not talking about. So that gap between science and policy would remain there forever, and it's a constructive gap. It's a positive thing to have. And the reason we are here is that because we are hopeful. We think that talking, speaking to people can change the game. The fact that we're showing that the progress has not been made, the fact that we are indicating this through valid data, reliable measurements can hopefully change the game. So far, it has been a lot of talk, but this is probably one of the first times that we're looking at by statistics and data, and hopefully that has an impact with the help of people in the media who can do a better job in storytelling than us.
I'll just add one quick thing. I don't normally come to these kind of meetings. I'm a scientist, and I like to work on data and science. But I came because I thought it was a good opportunity to raise the alarm on the water situation and how people experience it. COVID, actually, I had a great time during COVID. It made me very hopeful that the world could take action, and I would like to see that action translated to the water agenda. Look at how many people are dying due to unsafe wash. This is not acceptable, not acceptable. People died from COVID, far fewer people died from COVID than die every day from lack of clean water and sanitation. So the world needs to wake up and start doing something about it.
Thank you. And I'll take the question on the left.
Sure. It's going to be a bilingual question, if you will. We don't have any designated organizations, world organizations for water. We have FAO, WHO. Would that be helpful? That would be one question. The other thing is, considering that we have a number of, let's say, 23 stable or water-secure countries in your study, like Sweden and other countries, how do you measure environmental justice in those countries? Can you measure them or not? And is there any equivalent with that? And the final question, where does Iran stand there? So I'll ask in Persian as well. آقای دکتر مدنی، ما الان مؤسسه جهانی برای مدیریت آب یا بحث مدیریت آب نداریم. فاو رو داریم، مؤسسه جهانی بهداشت رو داریم، ولی برای آب نداریم. آیا وجود چنین نهادی میتونه کمک بکنه؟ و بعد کشورهایی که از نظر آب در شرایط ایمن قرار دارند، آیا عدالت محیط زیستی در اونها قابل در حقیقت مقایسه است با وضعیت ایمنی آبشون؟ و نهایتاً ایران در چه جایگاهی قرار داره؟ متشکرم.
Very long question, multiple questions. We have a mechanism called UN Water, which coordinates the actions on water among the UN agencies. So there is something there that we are benefiting from. We can discuss the pros and cons of this. What we know is that the world doesn't need more bureaucracy. Having an organization in place does not really always result in action. There would be recommendations out of this conference regarding having a special envoy for water. So that can be, for example, a game changer and a good start. I'm hopeful that at some point the issue would be taken to the Security Council, given the impacts of water resources, shortage, bankruptcy on the world and on our security and what can happen. But regarding the justice issue that you mentioned, this is not one element of our assessment. It has not been an indicator. We are seeing increasing discussions on this We already understand the issue of, for years, we have had a special rapporteur on the issue of water and sanitation, human rights violations. So that is already there. You must know that also there was a progress last year, a significant progress in recognizing the human rights to safe and sustainable environment. That's also a step forward. When it comes to measurement, of course, these are challenging. In an interconnected world, anything you do, any decision you make anywhere in the world has impacts on different groups. The externalities are huge. I think we are far from doing a just measurement of justice, but that is a possibility. When it comes to Iran, Iran was not among the critically insecure countries, so it's not, but it's in the third group. We have 4 groups of in the ranking. And water security has different dimensions, as my colleague just explained. I think in case of Iran, the issues of wastewater treatment, proper sanitation, the issue of governance, and some of these issues were critical. Iran doesn't do a good performance in that. It's vulnerable to drought, so it is a country that must be worried about both the status of water and its reporting, and because in the region, according to our data, our assessment, it's slightly better than, for example, some of the neighbors. I think in the region, if I remember correctly, Afghanistan is doing worse. Tajikistan is doing worse, but Iran, Syria in that region is doing worse, but Iran, at least in terms of assessment, is not a top performer there, and that's worrying. Now, you don't want that in Persian, do you? یک دونه داشتن یک نهاد دیگر لزوماً به تصمیم گیری نمی انجامه. لزوماً اینکه ما یک نهاد دیگه درست کنیم، بوروکراسی رو زیاد بکنیم، لزوماً نمیتونیم تصمیمات ویژه بگیریم. تو کشور خودمون هم این رو تجربه کردیم، در ایران هم این رو تجربه کردیم که با داشتن نهادهای بیشتر، بدون اینکه سیاستمداران بفهمن که باید رفتارشون رو در مورد آب عوض بکنن، تغییری حاصل نمیشه. و این چیزی است که به نظر من باید در نظر گرفت. اگر کسی پیشنهاد میده که سازمان ملل یک نهاد دیگری در مورد آب داشته باشه، ما یک مکانیزمی رو الان داریم برای هماهنگی بین نهادهای سازمان ملل در مورد موضوع آب و اون رو نباید در واقع نادیده گرفت، نقش اون رو. در مورد اینکه بحث عدالت چگونه اندازه‌گیری میشه یا بررسی میشه، مشکلی که ما داریم اینه که این موضوع جدیده. هنوز بحث اینه که چگونه این رو بفهمیم و بسنجیم آسون نیست. دنیا پیشرفت خوبی رو داشته در مورد اینکه به رسمیت بشناسه حقوق انسان‌ها به موضوع محیط زیست، آب سالم و هوای پاک. این اتفاق خوبی است، اما فاصله وجود داره تا روزی که بتونیم کار بهتر بکنیم. در مورد وضعیت ایران و جایگاه ایران در این بررسی و سنجشی که ما انجام دادیم، ایران در رده بدترین کشورها قرار نگرفته، در دسته 4 قرار نگرفته، جایی که فرضاً افغانستان هست، اما در دسته 3 هست و باید نگرانش بود. و بعضی از این بحث‌ها برمیگرده به نبود آب بهداشتی، به خصوص در مناطق روستایی، آسیب پذیری ایران در مقابل خشکسالی، بحث مدیریت آب و بحث‌های این چنینی که باید اون ابعاد قضیه رو در نظر گرفت. فقط با ساختن سدهای بیشتر و با بالا بردن مصرف آب به جایی نمیرسیم. در مورد ایران یک موضوع دیگر هم مهم بود و اون ارزش اقتصادی آب. ایران آب رو در واقع بی ارزش میدونه عملاً تو این محاسبات ما و در جایی استفاده میکنه که بازگشت اقتصادی بالایی نداره.
In the room, otherwise I'll turn online. Colleagues online, if there's a question that you'd like to come in on it. I hear no questions. The floor's open if you're online and you'd like to come in with a question. If not, I think we can end it there. Thanks so much, and thanks for everyone for joining today and to our speakers. And that ends today's press briefing. Thank you.
Thank you.